In addition to her work as an editor, she has reported from across Asia, including China, Thailand, Indonesia, and Sri Lanka, and on diverse cultures across the US from Southern California to Minneapolis. She's been a fellow of the Institute for Justice and Journalism, Journalism and Media, Journalism and Women Symposium in Illinois, and Illinois Humanities, a consulting editor to the Journal of Asian Studies and co-editor of Chinese Characters. Let's give a round of applause for Angilee Shah, please.
Thank you. So I know you guys are like deep in your projects. I'm gonna move this quickly, but I wanted to talk a little bit about stepping back, because I think we're all in our spaces and in this hackathon biting off something, right? Some part of the whole picture, and I wanted us to just take a second to step back and think about sort of the whole pipeline. So the exercise in this is pretty simple. What's a media outlet that you would love to work for, or that you admire, or that maybe you just see a lot? Just shout it out. Okay, so take your phone or computer or whatever you got in front of you and look at their website. Can you figure out who the stakeholders for that organization is? Do you know who their intended audience is? And do you know where their revenue comes from? And just shout it out if you got any insights here. So where does the revenue come from? Where do they get their money? And who is their intended audience? Okay, so Disney is a major stakeholder, right? They're trying to please Disney. Who are they trying to serve? Sometimes it's the same, sometimes it's different. What else? What else can you see? Your local newspaper? Where does the revenue come from? Mm-hmm. So that's like local businesses often?
Yeah, big box stores.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Where else does the revenue come from?
LA Times gets theirs from international investors.
Huh, interesting. All right. Arguably, that might be their audience as well. Can talk about that. All right.
The Guardian, Weir's contribution to support Guardian's journalism, but it's not charitable donation. So they ask readers to contribute directly to their journalism.
Mm-hmm. So members, subscription. They also get major grants.
Yeah.
Right, is that visible?
No, the Scott Trust Limited.
Mm-hmm. There's one.
But are you looking at the fine?
No. It's like one of the first things that shows up about contribution,
Yeah,
support.
yeah.
It might be visible if they're a nonprofit media group if you look at their tax form.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at The Economist, and it says individual shareholders include Cadbury, Rothschild, Schroeder, and other companies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The Intercept and their first look media,
Uh-huh.
starting by the founder of eBay.
Yeah. Omidyar. Right? Right?
Right. I'm looking at ProPublica, and they get a lot of their, it's a nonprofit organization, and a lot of it comes from foundations.
Yeah. Yeah. And can you name any of them?
There's the Craigslist Foundation, Democracy Fund, the Joyce Foundation, yes, a lot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, good. So I have this obsession with power and who has power, and often the decisions we make. I don't know about you guys, but my day-to-day decisions about how I spend my time every day, they're often made by money, right? Like I'm going to a job. I love my job, don't get me wrong. I'm also going to a job to make money, right? Like you gotta make a living. So you know, when you're thinking about media and what motivates it, that revenue source is really, really important. I'm in public media, which, oh man, it's like a black hole of all kinds of funding. We have revenue streams that are for national programming. You have local stations, right? So if you've ever been to, has anybody in this room ever been to a public radio news directors conference or program directors conference. So I've been like the one of two brown people in these conferences, speaking on panels. I'm not a program director, but it is not diverse. It is not a diverse group of people. So you have organizations like ours that depend on them picking up your programming and paying for it. And then on the other side, you have foundations. So some of our major, and I say this not like, yeah, I'm happy we get this funding. You know, I'm not saying this because I don't think foundations should be supporting organizations. But, you know, our major funders are MacArthur. The Gates Foundation has given us considerable amounts of money. The Ford Foundation has given us considerable amounts of money, and among many others. So the question is, who are the stakeholders, right? So if you're the Gates Foundation, we cover immigration, right? What happens when these foundations are intentionally or not major stakeholders? Because we're so dependent on them for our survival. So, you know, the small thing that we did, and this is kind of old, but in 2016, I started to become very, very frustrated, right? Because we spent a lot of time writing reports for foundations. We spent a lot of time reporting back to stations, to people who were not as brown as the people in our news stories, frankly. And we had this wonderful community, mostly on Facebook, who was talking about immigration issues. And we had some leaders in that group who said, you know, we really want to help you to do coverage, to bring more people into what you do. And it was a very amazing thing because they ran a campaign for us, basically. So I want to show you sort of how we did that.
I want to tell stories about farm workers because I was one.
I want to tell stories about what happens to families when they migrate to the United States and all of a sudden they find themselves being considered a different ethnicity.
I want to tell stories about people who are doing really cool things but aren't necessarily making headlines.
So I want to tell stories about, you know, the people in the communities trying to make change across this country.
You know, I want to tell the stories of an America that looks like me, sounds like me, that it's not hyphenated, it's not one culture.
I want to tell stories that draw out voices that have been historically left out of the picture.
I want to tell stories that clear up the misconceptions about what the refugee experience really is.
I want to tell stories about how what happens in Washington affects people in their homes.
I think the concept of creating a crowdfunding campaign to tell these voices and to support the people as they're telling their voices, that's pretty revolutionary in new media.
In the changing of America, we don't have many outlets to tell our stories.
Too much media rely on so-called experts when reporting on refugees or immigrants, and not people who have lived on-the-ground experience.
There's all this talk about mainstream media and how there needs to be more diversity, as if there aren't that many people of color making stuff, when in reality there are like a ton of people making really cool stuff.
There are people who are in their own spaces doing the work, telling the stories.
I learn something new every time I listen or read a global nation story.
Now we want more of you to tell these stories.
You know, whether it's healthcare, immigration.
I want to hear about their experiences once they've gotten here. I want to hear about what their lives were like before they came to the United States.
National security, criminal justice.
We value new voices, and because of that, we want to pay them for their work.
It's connecting people who are doing the work and who have been doing the work for a really long time.
I'm Ada Singh.
I'm James Edwards.
I'm Monica Campbell.
I'm Sunny Lay.
My name is Maria Muriel.
I'm Angilee Shah.
I'm Natasha Varner.
I'm Jared Goyette.
My name is Erica Lee.
My name is Miguel Morales.
My name is Evan Taparada.
I support Global Nation because it produces the kinds of stories that I care about immigration and race that I don't hear anywhere else.
Please support us.
We need your support.
Give to this campaign because we need new voices in public media.
We need your support.
And we need your support to embark on this next chapter of journalism that we hope to pursue.
So you can see it's pretty lo-fi. I did this using iMovie and
Did
Skype
you take
video.
notes for this?
I did take notes.
I know you did. Oh my god. That's awesome.
And we had a lot of fun doing it. But we raised, this is a small number in the grand scheme of, you know, public media budget. But I kind of look at it and I tear up because those dollars came, oh God, I'm going really terrible. Those dollars came from people of color. They came from people who don't have that much money. They came $1, $2 at a time. You know, one guy wrote to me, he's a guy we had written about before, he's undocumented, and he was having trouble getting his work authorization, and he gave us $2. And he wrote to me and apologized that he couldn't give more. And that money is so important because they are our stakeholders, right? Nobody else. They are our stakeholders. And this pot of money, which now we've spent, was meant only to be spent on brand new contributors to public media. Nobody else. First-time stories, first-time contributors only. So in the course of a little over a year, we brought in 50 new people who had bylines, authorship on our site, on The World. And a lot of those people have gone on to get more commissions. Several of them, Ada, who you see in the video, she was hired by the LA Times 2 weeks ago. A lot of them have gone on to do really great things. They just needed that step in the door. And what worked for us was making it a financial imperative to do it. And so when I think about this, like, this is a small step. There were certainly some parts of it that worked well, some parts that were failures. There's a problem of scale, right? Like, can we get it to be bigger than this? But what I wanted to sort of convey today is that, like, if you see a problem in the pipeline from beginning to end, let's look at every part of that problem and see where we can change it, right? Like, if you want to do the kind of media that is owned by the audience that you want, how can you get there? And so when you look at the news organizations that you want to work for, how does that play into your decisions about where you put your energy? So that's all. That's my impassioned plea. Thank you.